How is it going, everyone? My name is Jovani and welcome back to another video. Today, we're gonna be doing something a little bit interesting here. This is my 1976 C30 dually crew cab. And what we have here is this is a 1996 Gen 6 big block Chevy. So this thing would have came in like a 96 to 2001-ish 3500 truck. A big truck would have had this engine in it. What's nice about these engines is that they are all hydraulic roller cam, and it actually would have came factory fuel injected. As you can see right now, we have a Holley carburetor on ours, and we have a HEI distributor hooked up. But what we're gonna be doing today is a little bit of an experiment. I'd like to try to get the factory fuel injection working on this engine, because as you guys know, I'm an LS guy, I'm a fuel injection guy. So getting the factory fuel injection working on this would actually be pretty cool. Now that all sounds pretty straightforward, but we're gonna be doing things a little bit differently. And what I mean by that is we're actually gonna try to get this thing running on a 0411 ECU. Now, if you guys aren't aware, an 0411 ECU is the red and blue ECU that would have came stock on quite a bit of the early LS models. Think about your Camaros, Firebirds, early Silverados, things like that. And the reason why we're gonna be trying to use this ECU is because, well, I use HP tuners and I could easily tune this thing to be able to kind of do what I need to do with it. Now, this engine really didn't have a wiring harness that came with it or anything like that. So the best and cheapest way I could figure out how to do this was to actually buy one of my favorite Amazon Chinese wiring harnesses. And as you can see, that's what is on here right now. So this is the stock MPFI intake for that Vortec big block. It's a little bit interesting here. So it's a two-piece intake, and then in here is the injectors. It's actually kind of cool, but a lot of it is actually running already LS style stuff. So as you can see, our throttle body connectors, they all fit. Our map sensor, that fits. Coolant temp sensor, all that stuff works. So what's neat about this is that a lot of the plugs already fit. And what we did basically is we just ordered, you know, a $90 Amazon wiring harness for a 4L80E, and we've really just stripped the tubing off of it. And we've made a couple modifications to some wires. As you can see, like this is going to be our crank sensor wire. And then in the back, we're gonna have our distributor, and that's gonna have this. We're gonna change this to fit our distributor, but this is gonna be a cam sensor signal. Our distributor is gonna give us our cam sensor signal, O2 sensors. Really, a lot of this stuff fits, right? We didn't have to make too many modifications. The main thing that we're gonna have to do, obviously, is just kind of modify some of the plugs on this. So some of these plugs are gonna get cut and maybe pigtailed onto something else. But what we didn't have to do is we didn't have to actually change the fuel injector plugs. Now the factory fuel injector harness was actually this little pigtail here, but as you can see, those are the same fuel injector adapters that would have came on an early LS engine, but this one kind of went to this pigtail. I just went away with that. I don't think we'll be removing the intake that often, and even so, if we did, we can remove the top plenum and just, you know, change things from there. So all of our fuel injectors did in fact fit, but what we might have to do is we might have to actually change some things around, right? So the big thing is we're gonna have to probably repin the ECU harness itself, because the factory firing order on a big block is 184-36572. The firing order on an LS is 187-26543. So that means that we're gonna have to flop the 4 and 7 cylinders and the 2 and 3 cylinders. The easiest way I figured to do that is not to change the actual injectors themselves, but to change the actual pins on the ECUs. Now, I know that all sounds very complicated, and for a lot of you guys, you may not understand anything that's going on here. That's okay, because this video is not really an instructional video in a sense. This video is really just seeing if I could do it, right? If I could do it, then awesome. I can get this engine running and I'll have fuel injection and I won't have to worry about cold starts and carburetors and, you know, all that stuff. This will just be like every other car that I have where you just get in and start it and it works, right? Just like my Suburban that has a 5.3 in it, and just like a lot of the other cars that I've done that are LS swapped. Now, obviously the advantage is that we have a lot more cubic inches, right? So we're getting a 454 LS basically out of this, right? Getting all the luxuries and amenities of an LS, but with the torque and the power of the big block Chevy. With that being said, there is still a lot of work here to do, but what I think I'm gonna do right now is I'm gonna go ahead and remove the intake and stuff off of that truck. We're gonna test fit this stuff. Obviously it's gonna fit, but more so I'm trying to get the wiring harness kind of dialed in before we even go forward with this. I'll get probably the bottom half of that intake mounted up, leave the top plenum off, and really just kind of nail down some of this wiring. We're gonna have to figure out, obviously, cable throttle body. That shouldn't be too hard. We can probably use a stock cable off of like a 99 Silverado or something like that. Just kind of figuring out the rest of this stuff, right? So heater hose, we could probably unscrew that and put a nipple there. Coolant, there's a lot of stuff, obviously. I really just want to get this thing in there because once it's in there, I'm gonna have no choice but to get this stuff wired up properly. And that way we can get this truck project moved down the road a little bit. Now, if you guys went back and watched my latest update video, you'll know that the C30 actually does run and drive. It just doesn't run very well. And the main reason I believe is because of the distributor gear. Now, like I said earlier, this engine is a hydraulic roller cam, right? So what that means is that that cam is actually a hardened like steel material, right? That cam is a lot more durable than say a flat tappet cam would be. Now what that means is that there is actually a specific distributor gear that needs to go with that. And so what I have here in my hand is a Vortex style distributor. These would be found on, you know, a late 90s small block Chevy, obviously, or big block Chevy. But what this has is the proper, I believe it's a melanized distributor gear that's gonna mesh better and not wear down as fast with that hardened camshaft, or that harder camshaft, I should say. I don't know if it's actually hardened or not. What would have came in like an old big block like the one here, camshaft that would have came on something like this would be a iron ductile cam. So something similar to this here. And these would actually use a much softer distributor gear, right? Because our goal here when we're doing this is we want, obviously there's gonna be wear eventually, right? You would hope that there's not very much during the lifetime of the engine, but if there were to be, we would want to sacrifice the distributor gear because that's easier to remove than the camshaft itself, right? So, long-winded way to say that I believe that I have the wrong distributor gear in this truck. I believe it's actually worn already in the short amount of time that I've driven it. So we're gonna see now once we pull the distributor, but I believe that's what's kind of going on. I have a little bit of a stumble, a little bit of a backfire every now and then while it's idling. So I believe that's kind of where we're gonna go. We're gonna be using this distributor anyway, this Vortex one. And that's because this Vortex distributor actually provides our camshaft signal. You can see the plug there. That actually provides the proper camshaft signal for the ECU, right? So we'll be able to use that to provide a 1x signal, double that with our engine crank signal, so our crank position sensor, which is going to provide a 24x signal. So we'll have basically what came on a LS1 engine, which is a 24x and then a 1x cam signal for the engine. Fancy way of saying the computer will know where the engine is in its rotation. Now, I know probably a lot of you guys are wondering why I'm going through all this effort here. Really, all that would be needed to fix this would be just changing that distributor gear on this HEI, which we can do, but I want to see if it's possible, right? I know it's possible, and I just personally want to see, not so much that it can be done, but it's a good learning experience for me, and obviously the advantages of fuel injection are there as well. There's nothing inherently wrong with a carburetor and HEI, right? I've run them. This truck has always had one. I just want to see kind of what I can do. I want to personally test my abilities here. So this might be frustrating. This might be a lot of work, but I'm really just wanting to do this just to see if I can, right? Not everyone's going to be doing this, so that's why I'm not really even making this an instructional video. There's very few of these Gen 6 big blocks out there, right? This is a very short run engine. I believe you could probably get this done with a Gen 5 as well, but really this Gen 6 is a little bit of a unicorn. And like I said, I just want to see what I can do here. I think it'll be kind of fun, kind of interesting. And then hopefully we get it working to where we can use this truck more. I do really enjoy this truck and I want to keep it going as long as possible. And why not have a fuel injected hydraulic roller cam engine, right? I'm gonna get started on this. I'm gonna start by removing the carburetor and then removing the distributor. And then lastly, we'll remove the intake. I'm gonna have to drain some coolant obviously. So it's gonna be a lot. I'm probably just gonna time lapse a lot of this. So I'll catch you guys in a few. Okay, so as you can see, we got the intake removed. Not too hard. I only smashed my finger once or twice. And as a bonus, it looks like we were able to preserve this brand new gasket that I had just put on here not too long ago. So that's an extra bonus. I don't have to spend money on a gasket. Something I've been doing lately, and the reason why I think I was able to save this, I've been using shellac gasket compound on the block side of all my intake gaskets lately. And it does two things, right? It allows the gasket to stay in place while you're, doing things and putting the intake on. And then like this, it really just keeps it on there tight. Obviously, I think if I were to go to remove this, I'd probably ruin it, but it's fine because it didn't get damaged whatsoever. And then on here, on all your big blocks or small blocks, this is what they call the China wall. You're always just going to use RTV on that area. You're not going to use the rubber gaskets or cork gaskets that they give you. So all in all, it was fairly easy to remove that intake. I'm going to go over here to the distributor. I don't believe we have any wear issues. Maybe we do. Maybe it's a little bit worn. You can see kind of the engagement pattern there. It looks a little bit deep and a little bit aggressive, but I really don't think that this would have caused us a lot of harm or a lot of issues. So I don't think that was a problem, but either way, we're moving on. We're moving on, and we're going to try to go with the fuel injection as originally planned. So what we have now, I'm not going to permanently install this intake just yet because we're mocking up basically. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab our intake here. I'm going to go place it on the truck, and then we're going to just mock up this harness. We're going to figure out where everything needs to go. If I need to modify any of those plugs, we're going to do it then. Once it's all locked in and ready, we'll go ahead and remove the entire harness. I'm going to loom it all up really nicely, and then we'll go ahead and final install our intake at that point. So still quite a bit more work to go, but this is all kind of just like this is the design and engineering phase, right? Once this part's done, it's really all just going to be tuning and kind of just figuring things out as they go. So let's put that intake on. Alrighty, so that's in there. It's not bolted down or anything, it's just sitting there. But what that allows us to do now is really figure out where all these wires are gonna go. So we have all the injectors plugged in. We need to figure out coil packs. So we're gonna be doing what's called coil near plug, just like the LS. We're gonna mount coils to the valve covers. So we're probably gonna have to custom make brackets for those. We could buy potentially the coil or the valve covers for an 8.1 Vortec, but I don't think it's going to fit with our throttle body anyway. So we're probably going to just cut some LS brackets in half and kind of just spread them apart, right? So that's that. We're going to have to route the wire for those as well, which is somewhere around here. Let's see. This guy. So this guy gets plugged in somewhere around here. So this wire here, we might have to extend. But basically that's going to run down to the front of our crankshaft, and it looks like that wire is actually going to be okay lengthwise. So that one we'll figure out. I'm just going to kind of roughly place everything where it needs to go. So that's going to go to the front of the engine. This is our coil pack for this side. What else do we have here? This is our MAF sensor, so that looks like that's going to be able to get plugged in somewhere around there. We're going to have to make a custom intake most likely. I really would like this harness to go back and around the engine, so we're going to play with that. Most likely our ECU and stuff, I think it's just going to go somewhere on this fender well here. So we'll kind of precariously place that there. Let's see, this is our alternator wire, which luckily for us, our alternator is on this side of the engine, so that I can actually go here. I'm going to just unplug this one. Should really disconnect the battery as well. So I'll disconnect the battery, but this looks like that will go there just fine, no problem there. I know there's a couple other key items here that we kind of need to sort out. What I really want here, let me prop this up. What I really want is I want this harness to just kind of flow to the back of the engine. So we would have a nice chunk here, right? And then the rest of these kind of, yeah, so just something like that, right? These go down to the starter, so that should be able to reach from here. We may or may not have to adjust those a little bit or lengthen those, but it looks like they might be able to go back in behind the engine down to the starter. These are all okay. I think what I really want is just, you know, I want everything to be somewhat clean. So we'll probably just have something like that. I know we have our cam sensor back here. That should just plug into the distributor, no problem. I just need to change the actual pinning on that. So that's gonna get repinned to a different style of plug, actually. We have some O2 wires back there, I'm pretty sure. Those we may need to just lengthen to get down to the exhaust. But other than that, I think this side's all addressed. Now this side is a little, both more and less complicated. So this side has the transmission plug, which we're actually not gonna be using right now, but we're gonna go ahead and just get it nice and ready to go back behind the engine and just kind of live back there for now. This is knock sensor, so I don't think we're actually even gonna need that. And then this is our O2 sensor. So most of this stuff's just gonna get tucked behind the engine. We might have to buy some extendos for those oxygen sensor plugs. And then I believe there is, yes, there's one wire here that I did cut, 2 wires, looks like. So there's the positive wire for this coil pack and the ground, which we will just extend. I have the other piece right here, so we'll just extend that. So that way this guy could get plugged in, you know, here-ish. With all that being said, I don't think there's much. I had everything mostly laid out where it needs to go. So now it's just a matter of getting everything, you know, tidy and proper. I think what my plan is, I have some harness tape here. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna loosely just kind of wrap the harness where everything needs to go. We'll kind of just remove everything and actually loom it all up and then place everything back one last time. We're not gonna even bolt this intake down till all that's done. And I still need to clean like the intake gaskets and stuff like that. So this is all just wiring at this point. Another cool feature or cool thing about this, I had no idea how to block off this EGR. I found a plug. I'll put the size right here because I already forgot, but it's basically like an M12 or something or another plug. And then it is a Vortec EGR block off. So a small block Chevy Vortec EGR plug basically works there too. So that's pretty neat. That saved me some trouble. It's only about 20 bucks to block that off. And then another like $10 for this plug. So we won't have EGR. We'll just cap this line here, so no vacuum leak. And then we'll just keep on moving. Everything is actually working out a lot better than I thought it would. I kept holding off on this because I was like, man, I do not want to start this all from scratch, right? I was gonna have to basically make a custom harness for this to replicate the stock harness. But once I started looking at it, I noticed everything was kind of LS style already. I think GM had already switched to like the MetroPack connectors and stuff like that in the late 90s. So everything is very similar to like an LS1 engine would be. So $100 wiring harness saved me probably hours and hours of time. What's cool is too, is that I do actually have a 4 LED for this engine, the one that came with it. So at some point, if we wanted to, we can switch this TH400 over to a 4 LED E, and then we would have not only overdrive, but a 4th gear as well. Yeah, so a lot of work left to be done, but I'm gonna just roughly start getting everything just, you know, where it's supposed to go. I'm gonna have to crawl inside the engine bay and kind of do my best to get everything organized to the best I can. Okay, so I'm working on the alternator, and what this is the LS style plug, and what we have here is this is basically what we call a 1-wire alternator plug. All this 1 wire does is actually, it's called excite the alternator, so it's an exciter wire. It's basically just 12 volts that switch with the ignition, and that's what tells the alternator that we're on. And the original plug here for this alternator looks like this, and basically all we have to really figure out here or know is that right next to this big plug, the exciter wire was this one, let's see, so the second one over, basically from the left here. So what we're gonna do, I believe, since these are both, you know, Delphi plugs or MetroPacks, whatever they are, I believe what we can do is we can actually just remove this and insert it into there. If it doesn't work, we will just go ahead and repin this, probably just add a cut here and splice it in. But let's just see. So to remove these, They're fairly straightforward. I'm just trying to see if there's any, yeah, so there's a little safety pack here. What the tool I'm using here is just a little precision screwdriver that I've kind of ground down, and it makes for a very, you know, nice little tool here. It's basically ground flat. I have not taken apart specifically one of these alternator plugs, but they're very similar to all the other Metro packs. Pretty much we're just gonna get this guy off like that. Ow. Okay, I'll get that piece in a second here. But now we should be able to just simply insert this into here. And that's actually very small. That's actually smaller than my pin is here. Let's see. You're just trying to get it up on the top there, just enough to push down the little pin. And once it's done, you should be able to just pull it out like that. And so now, once it's done, what I always do is always take this little pin and I will re-up it basically. I'll just pull it back up. I know this is all very hard to see, but we're just gonna pry that lock back up, that pin. And now, the best way to go about this is first check to see if it actually will go in, because we have to know if these pins are the same as the other ones. It looks like they definitely are the same style of plug. I may just need to trim the little rubber seal off from the back. Pull it back, I guess. And try again. Let's see, so it should go something like this. Yeah, okay, so what's holding us up is this actual, the crimp here that goes onto the little rubber plug. That is what's holding us up, so I actually have the right tool to be able to crimp that back down. So this tool right here, I've used this thing for everything. It's an IWS 1424. But I've used this thing for everything from like old harmonica plugs in like steering columns to like basically everything. It's just really good at crimping things. It's probably not the proper crimp for a lot of things, but it gets the job done regardless. So now that we've got that in, let's see if this will, yes. So that's what we want right there. Now, before we lock this in for good, we're actually gonna take this plug back out. Okay, I'm gonna pull up on our lock, and I'm gonna get the actual rubber boot for this, which is this guy, and just pass this back through the rubber boot. Now, final assembly, we're just gonna place this there, locked in, slide up our boot, and there we go. There's also a locking retainer thing right here, and this guy just goes in here like this, and that keeps the pins from actually falling out. And that is everything. So we've gone ahead and repinned our alternator. I can just keep this little rubber boot up here somewhere. But yeah, that's our alternator plug. That was very straightforward. So now this should excite our alternator, you know, do what it's supposed to do. All right, so just continuing progress on this little EFI conversion here, or EFI non-conversion, I don't know. This is a Vortec distributor. The reason why we're switching for this is two things. One, we don't actually need an actual distributor anymore. All we really need is a cam signal. And so this Vortec distributor should provide us that cam signal. If we look over here, this is the plug for the cam sensor. This is the stock LS one. It does not fit into the Vortec distributor, but we do have this. I believe this is a MetroPack 150 3-prong. I don't know the exact model of this one, but this one does fit into the distributor. So I had already put the distributor in and then realized I forgot to switch this plug out. So it sucks a little bit now that the harness is already in the truck. But basically what we're gonna do, I believe they're the same pins. If not, I have pins. But basically we're just gonna swap this plug for this one. And I believe the wiring order is gonna be the same. We're gonna test everything the way it is for now. We'll have to diagnose if we're not, you know, getting cam signal or things like that. We might have to look at the actual pins and compare it to the Vortec style and where, you know, the power wire should be, the signal wire, the ground, all the things like that. But fairly easily we should be able to just depin this one and pop them into this one and be good to go. Now these are two different kind of styles of connectors, I guess. I do believe they use the same pins, like I said, but there's obviously some other differences. These style use a little rubber plug on the back for a weather seal. So we'll just convert everything over to this plug, and then hopefully that should be good to go. And then we'll have to re-drop in the distributor, find top dead center, all that stuff. So let me go ahead and do that. Okay, so we have the engine at top dead center on the compression stroke. The way I did that is just stick your finger over the #1 spark plug hole, turn the engine over until you start feeling air blowing past your finger, and then we line up the line basically on the balancer. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to pop this in. So like I said, we don't actually need the actual spark plug cap anymore. I did buy a blanking cap for this. Basically it's just an aluminum cover for this. I cannot find it. It was delivered to my house. I just don't know where it is. So when we find that, obviously we'll cap this off. But for now, we're having the cap off. This on the old cap, this little line I drew here, this is where top dead center was. Sorry, the #1 spark plug wire should have been on that cap. So I'm going to use this as my reference. I'm going to drop it in. Really, as long as I have enough play on this distributor to get this to line up. Basically, we just need enough play so we can see. Once the engine's running and everything, we'll get the timing light out, and then we'll basically phase this distributor to match up with what the timing light reads, right? So if we're demanding 18 degrees of timing, we want the timing light to show 18 degrees, and we'll manipulate this distributor to do that basically. With EFI or with, you know, the LS-based system, we can basically set 10 degrees and basically play with this distributor until we find 10 degrees. And then when this matches 10 degrees on the computer, then we'll know any effects or any timing changes we make digitally will play out in real time, basically. So we're going to go ahead and drop this bad boy in. As long as we're close to this line. And actually, the last time I did this, I had this phased out kind of weird. But it really doesn't matter. Like I said, we're not using it for actual spark plug timing. We're using it for the cam sensor. So our mark is actually going to be pointed towards the back of the engine, just because that gives us the most adjustability as far as the distributor is concerned. So there's our mark right there. I'm just going to get this guy in and get this rotor cap pointed somewhere along those lines, right? And then we can manipulate the distributor as much as we need to get this to actually line up. Here's our timing mark is right here. But what I'm going to do is I want to be able to move this distributor, you know, a wide range, right? So this gives us the correct amount of movement. Now I just want the rotor to be pointed, you know, somewhere towards that mark. And basically that will be our #1 timing mark. That way, you know, if we need to, we can rotate this way, that way, just to get the sensor to line up. And now the distributor is not fully seated down yet. So what we'll do actually is I'm going to get over here on the front of the engine, and I'm going to crank by hand the engine over. I'm going to turn the engine over by hand,
and we should see this distributor just kind of plop down. You can see the cap spinning. That means we're already synced with the cam. We just need it to drop into the oil drive, basically. I have to spin it quite a bit for it to drop down. And then kind of just double check it here. We're pretty close. I could feel it. Actually, we're just about there. I think like one more turn or so should get us to drop all the way in. With other distributors, you'll kind of hear like a clunk when it actually falls down. With this one, it's such a light distributor that it really didn't move too much. But now we'll get our hold down. Like I said, when we first start this engine, we're not going to know what the timing is. We just wanted it to be close. I'm going to loosely put that down. Basically, we'll kind of just, turn the distributor a little bit, probably somewhere like there. And then once the engine actually starts, we can get the timing light out and kind of adjust that distributor until we find the actual true timing, so 0 here, 0 there, and etc. And since all of this is done now, we should, in theory, be able to plug this in like so. Hold on. No, there we go. Okay. So that's our distributor in there. Like I said, I have that cap. We just got to find it or buy a new one. But distributor's ready to go. And then, I don't think I actually talked about it, but what you guys saw is I went ahead and made or modified these valve covers to accept the LS coils. And what that gives us, obviously, that gives us the ability to use coil near plug ignition, just like an LS uses. This side I had to modify, pretty extensively because of how the intake sits on here. This side I didn't have to do much modification at all. The only thing is that last spark plug is a little bit tight, so I might have to get a longer spark plug wire, but that's not really a big deal. We can sort that out when we get there. But for now, actually, I'm going to leave the top cover off of the intake. I'm going to go ahead and start trying to get some kind of AN line routed. Basically, when we have the carburetor, remember this was originally fuel injected. We have an intake and a return fuel line. It's just a matter of getting them routed to the back there, I think. So we can actually get rid of this fuel pressure regulator, I think. We can actually just route these AN lines straight to the back of that. So that should make our life a little bit easier. At some point, I do want to go ahead and just reroute the fuel lines in this truck. So we have, when we did the Holley system, we converted the fuel tank over to a 88 or 87 style fuel tank. You can see it in there. So that's already got the fuel injection, fuel pump and everything built into it. Right now I just have soft AN lines running all the way up to the front. I no longer like running my lines like that. I've had already several problems with this particular line. So what I will do eventually after we get it running and everything is I'm going to go back and hardline both the fuel lines, so the intake and the return. That way we just have no more problems. Change my fuel filter out while I'm down there and everything. But that should, kind of get everything up to the front of the engine. Right now, this is our return, I believe, and this is our feed. So we should be able to route those to the back there. I don't know if I showed that or not, but to convert this intake over to AN, we have an intake and we have a return. The return is always the smaller line. So we have an M14 1.5 O-ring adapter on the back of that one for the return, and we have an M16 1.5 O-ring adapter for the intake. And these are just, there's the ICT billet numbers and all that stuff. If you guys are doing this, I honestly don't know how many of you guys are going to be doing this, but good information to have on the internet just in case, right? I wish someone would have had this information for me. So we're getting pretty dang close. Really, the last couple things that need to happen are obviously the fuel routing and then kind of tidying up everything up here. And then we have to actually get the computer hooked up and actually programmed. Now, with this, you have to remember the big block has a different firing order than the LS does. I believe it's just the 4 and 7 spark plugs that have to swap, but we'll calculate all that stuff and we'll figure that out once we get there. But basically, we're going to be swapping on the ECU itself, so the ECU connectors. If the 4 and 7 need to be swapped, we'll just take the 4 out of where it goes, put it in the 7 hole, 7 in the 4 hole, and that will basically trick, in a sense, the computer to firing the right cylinders on our engine. So it's a little bit like, if you guys are new to EFI or engine philosophy or anything like that. It's a little bit hard to understand now, but I think once I do it, you guys will understand. Basically, if we left everything LS based right now, we'd always have a misfire because we would be firing the wrong bank or the wrong cylinder at the wrong time. So we want it to fire the right cylinder at the right time, so that's why we need to swap a couple things around. If you think about it this way, if we had the carburetor and the actual HEI, what we'd be doing is basically taking one, if the number 4 spark plug wire, putting it on the number 7, and the number 7 putting it on the 4. Now, I don't know if those are the right cylinders to be swapping, but that's just an idea, an example, right? Also, I've lost my voice, so that's why I'm talking like this. But in theory, this should all work out. I'm actually getting really excited because we're getting really close. Pretty much, I don't want to bolt this down until we're absolutely done because those gaskets I like to reuse, and they're, on their last leg, basically. So I don't want to have to swap those, but if I do, it's not the end of the world. But next thing on the list is going to be getting the fuel routed, and then also kind of just finishing up the wiring here, and then getting that ECU actually tuned and programmed and ready to go in a sense. So a couple more things, but I think this thing's going to be firing just pretty soon here. Okay, so I've got mostly everything buttoned up on the truck already. I've got the fuel lines connected. I've kind of got the wires where they need to go on the harness. One of the last things we need to do is to go ahead and repin the ECU. The reason why we're repinning the ECU is because we need the firing order to be correct, right? So I'm going to scoot you guys in just a little bit here so you can see. But I've written down a couple things here already. So this is a big block Chevy, right? Firing order on this is 1843657 okay? That's same as a small block Chevy. Now on the LS, the firing order is going to be 1872653, okay? So if we were to leave things exactly the way they were, just plug in the ECU and start the vehicle, we would already be having a misfire of 4 out of our 8 cylinders, right? Because 4 would be firing when 7 is supposed to be firing, and 3 would be firing when 2 is supposed to be firing, which means, 7's firing when 4, and et cetera, et cetera. So we'd be basically down half an engine, basically. This thing would probably run like absolute crap if we ran it like this. Now, what do we need to do in order to swap these firing orders? Well, what we have is we're going to be using an 0411 ECU, okay? 0411 ECU. 0411, it's a red and blue ECU, which is what most people will refer to them as. It's going to be for anything early or late 90s to early 2000s. So like your F-body Camaro is a perfect example of an 0411 ECU. Drive-by cable. It has the IAC controls and modules on the board for that. Just basically the most bare bones ECU we can possibly get our hands on that's going to be able to run something like this. Now, keep in mind, if you guys are trying this at home, we have converted this engine over to a 24X system, which means that we have a crank sensor on there now. That crank sensor has 24 teeth on it, and then we have a 1x cam sensor, which is the distributor now. So what we've done is we basically modified our sensors, our hardware on the engine to be able to correlate to the LS, right? Originally, this would have had a 4X reluctor on it, which means 4 teeth, or 4 signals on that reluctor. Now we have 24 of them. So we've done that. I used DFI connection, I believe it was. So we have that actually hidden behind the timing cover already. So that's all good, ready to go. What I don't know is the crank sensor that's in there. I'm not sure if that's going to read this. I don't know. I'll have to figure that one out when we get there. But for now, we have it, right? We'll figure that out. Now, back to the firing order. Which actually I did do, so on my small block Chevy, what I did is I bought a camshaft that was a 4-7 swap camshaft. So it's a small block, so it had the same firing order, but basically what it did is it swapped this 4 and 7 on the lobes itself of the cam, and it's supposed to help with efficiency, fuel burning, I don't know, balancing, something like that. But basically that camshaft had that swap on it, right? So what we did is, since we had an HEI, right, if this is our HEI here and you have your 8 spark plugs, what we did is we took the number 4 spark plug and we put it on the number 7 on the 4, right? And that means that now the number 4 is firing on the number 7 spark plug, because inside a distributor cap, we have a rotor, and that's just going in a circle, right? So if we want the order to change, we would just change which spark plug is firing at what time. I hope that makes sense, right? Now, we don't have an HEI distributor. We don't have spark plugs and a rotor. What we do have, though, is we have the ECU, right? And the ECU tells the injectors sequentially, you know, here's our fuel injector, or there, we have 8 fuel injectors. The ECU pins themselves ground out each injector according to the firing order. You know what I mean? So the ECU's firing off in this, it's firing 1, 8, 7, 2, 6, 5, 4, 3, right? That's what the ECU is doing. And it's doing that off of a ground signal. So the pins on the back of the ECU that control both of our ignition and our fuel injectors, those are ground signals. So what we're gonna do, right, because there's nothing that we can do in program or in software on HP tuners to be able to change the firing order, at least I'm not aware of it. We can't change it software based, so we have to do it hardware based, which means what we're gonna end up doing is we're gonna just swap the pins on the back of the ECU itself, much like we would a spark plug wire on a rotor, to be able to fire when we want it to. So we're changing the order of which the engine is firing by changing those pins. And for those of you playing at home, we have a red ECU and a blue ECU, obviously. So on the red ECU, we're gonna be switching pin red 67 on the ECU for pin red 69. We're gonna swap those two. That means that now our number 2 wire becomes our number 3 wire, and the number 3 wire becomes the number 2 wire. Same thing for the number 7 and number 4, pin R27 and pin red 29. Those will get swapped. Now, that's for our ignition, right? So that's going to tell the spark plugs themselves or the coils themselves to fire in that order. What we also need is, if we didn't change the fuel injectors, we'd be firing at still the wrong times. So we need now our fuel injectors, B3, which controls number 3, to swap with B4, which controls number 2, and then B43 for number 7 and B44 for number 4. So that's the blue side of the ECU. Pin number 3, pin number 4, pin number 43, pin number 44. So I hope this can help explain kind of what's going on. This is getting into a little bit higher, I don't know, a little bit more advanced fuel injection stuff, but all the basics and concepts are still there, right? We're just relating it to having our old cap and rotor, right? So if you guys are old school, you'll understand that what would happen if you swapped your number 4 for your number 7 spark plug. Well, you'd be firing at number 4 when it's supposed to be number 7, right? So that's all we're doing, but just a little bit more steps involved, right? On the back of the ECU, we have to change a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pins total, because we're doing fuel injector and ignition. So I hope this helps explain it a little bit. I'm going to be honest, I have not tested this yet. This should work in theory, but we're going to go out to the ECU and actually depin those and change them over. And then we will know once our engine either starts or does not start, right? So I hope this helps a little bit. I'm going to go repin that ECU, and then we're getting really close to having this engine fire. All right, so we need to repin this harness. We're going to start with the red side. Just a flathead screwdriver. Should be all on this left side, so we should only have to remove this one. Sometimes it's a little bit tricky to get this guy with the screw there. There we go. We're looking for pin 67, which is, oh, sorry, 67 is actually on this side, but 67, it's right here, this red one. Red 67 for 69. So we're going to take the red one out and swap it for the blue one, and vice versa. We just lift up a little bit on the tab and push down with our finger. Sometimes you need 2 tools for this. Just get something in there and just push down. There we go. 67, 69. Slide our this one. So now the blue. So this is a diagram I made. There we go. 67 is the red. So the red's gonna go to 69. Cool. Red is 69 now. The blue in 67. All right. So now those two are swapped. we have 27 to 29 on the red side. We're looking for 27, which is red, to 29, green. So same thing, open that, push that, open that, push that. So now we take our green out, and we're gonna put it where the red goes, and the red where the green goes. Okay, red's where the green was, green's where the red was. So make sure we push them all the way through until they come out the top, and they should kind of click in. So that's it for the red side. Those were our ignition wires. Pop this guy back on, and this will actually align your pins for you too if they're a little bit skewed one way or another. But now we're done with this side. Hop over to the blue side, and this one's going to be the same ordeal. You just push those all the way through till they click. Okay, easy peasy. And then our last one. Then we can put our cover back on. And it's as simple as that. That's how we change the firing order on a, you know, LS based harness, basically. And now those should be good to connect to our ECU. ECU won't know any differently. We're gonna just continue firing things off the way that the ECU thinks we would, but physically it's gonna be different, obviously. So now that that's done, I already have the 2 power wires hooked up to the starter. Realistically, all I'll need is 1 trigger wire, so a switched 12 volt to this side, which I have somewhere in there. I gotta reattach some wires to get that back, but this will just be our trigger wire to turn on and off the ECU. And other than that, that's basically it. We will eventually hook up like the fuel pump wires and everything. I already have relays up there that control the fuel and fans, I believe. We can actually control those now with the ECU, which is actually kind of nice. This bundle of wires here has all of those. I think this green one is for the fans, and one of these is for the fuel pump. If you guys are interested in this, even for your LS swaps, if you guys are buying these Amazon harnesses, go to my website, go to my blog. I have a couple articles on these with the wiring diagrams and stuff. These are I think those guides are absolutely crucial to these, because just like this one, I did not get anything in the package. I didn't get a book, I didn't get a diagram. I've reached out to some of these manufacturers of these, and they've actually sent me what these wires actually do. So that's almost invaluable to have when you're doing anything with these Amazon harnesses. Even if it's for an LS swap, it's good to know what these wires do. So now that we've got all that, I'm gonna go find me a 411 ECU from my shed, and I think we could hook it up and maybe put a battery in here and see what happens when we turn it on. So I'm getting excited. Alrighty everyone, so what have I done? So basically not a whole lot. I rewired my relay to fire my fuel pump basically. I had said I needed to do that. I ended up wiring it correctly this time. So that green wire you see here, this is the fuel pump relay send signal from the ECU or the harness. It was on this block. I just depinned it and moved it to the one that I already had in place that runs to the fuel pump. Just a basic relay wiring for LS stuff. But that's working. I don't have fans or anything. What I really just want to do at this point is kind of just crank the key and see what happens. The ECU is turning on. I have not tuned the ECU whatsoever, but if everything is correct, we're either going to get a lot of backfires. Well, if everything's correct, we're not going to get backfires, but if everything is operating, we should either get misfires or, you know, just the engine starts. I don't know which one's going to happen. My main concern here is the timing, obviously. If we can get the engine running well enough, we should be able to get it at least in time. My other main concern here, I don't have any O2 sensors hooked up. I don't have a MAF, obviously. It's going to be running in open loop, I think, or closed loop. I don't remember which one. So let's just see kind of what happens. I'm a little bit nervous, but let's just give it a crank. Let me make sure there's nothing in the way anywhere. No tools lodged inside the crank, anything like that. Other than that, let's just give it a whirl. I'm expecting at least a pop. Okay, so we're not really getting anything. I don't even think we're getting spark. Now, here's what I was worried about.
I did not check the wiring of the crank signal. I did not check if that crank signal will even work. I also did not check the cam signal wiring. So we could be completely out of time. Who knows what's going on? I also have not really checked the ECU to see what program is even on there, honestly. I just wanted to see if we would get a pop at all. I'm gonna just do a preliminary check for spark. I don't know if the injectors are firing. I don't know anything really. So I'm gonna at least put a spark checker on here and we'll check for spark. So I don't know if you guys will even be able to see this, but if you look deep down in there, maybe you'll be able to see spark. Yeah, okay, right about there. So that's spark. I don't know how I'm gonna see it. 1 second here. Okay, stop. One more time. Okay, stop. Stop. Okay, I'm not getting any spark. Oh, wait. Hold on. I just thought of something. Hold on, before you do that, oh, never mind. I already did it. Okay. Okay, go ahead. Okay, stop. Okay, thank you. No, stop. Okay. No. All right, everyone. So it's been about 2 or 3 weeks of me just working on this thing almost every single day, trying to figure out what the issue is. Pretty much, I have gone through almost everything on this truck, wiring, ECU. I've thrown 10 to 15 tunes on these ECUs. I've tried swapping ECUs. I've gone through the entire works. I've taken off the harness, made sure every pin goes where it needs to go. We tested throttle bodies, everything I can basically think of on this vehicle. And pretty much it was just not starting. It would crank, it would pop, it would never start. We would sometimes get some really loud backfires and pretty much just could not get it to start. So I started looking at the cam sensor, which is the distributor basically. Pretty much we just have a headless distributor that just acts as our cam sensor. And I went through just about everything on that to set the timing as perfect as possible. But I had read that it really shouldn't even need a cam sensor since we're using an LS-based system. Basically the way the cam sensor works is that it just is one signal per rotation. So without the cam sensor, the crank sensor will actually do the work of it. It will just basically try to fire 2 or 3 or 4 times until it finally catches. The simple way to think of it is that your timing starts at your compression stroke and the LS engine will just basically spin over until it fires on the compression stroke. So it'll fire on the exhaust stroke, intake stroke, like just keep firing until it hits that compression stroke and then the engine will start. Well, mine just didn't start whatsoever. So I kind of concluded that it could not have been the cam sensor at this point. And I just kept probing and digging and digging and probing and basically losing my mind. Now, what did it end up being? Well, what it ended up being was simply the spark plugs. You know, we're using LS-based coils now. There obviously is a different ignition requirement for that. I had thought about it, didn't really do much about it, kept trying other things. Well, the spark plugs I had bought were for a 1997 454. The 454 didn't have LS coil packs on it. I didn't think it would be a big deal. I was getting spark on the spark plugs. I would pull the spark plug out, check for spark. It would have spark, put it back in. And the weirdest thing was the engine would pop every time, every single time. Take a spark plug out, clean it, get the raw fuel off of it basically, because we were just washing down our cylinders at this point from trying so much. Clean it with the rag, throw it back in, the engine would give us one good pop. Well, then we figured if it's giving us one pop when we clean one spark plug, maybe we just fouled out all of our plugs. So we took out all 8 spark plugs, cleaned them all up, and what do you know, the engine would basically try to start in a sense. It would get up to like 400 or 500 RPM. Well, then it wouldn't. It would just basically crank and crank and crank and crank and crank and then never try to start again. Take the spark plugs out, clean them, it would try to start. Well, doing this 4, 5, 6 times finally started having me thinking, you know, because in this situation, all of my wits weren't really about me because I'm getting spark. You know, I'm taking the spark plug out and I'm watching the spark happen on the spark plug. But as soon as we're putting it inside the engine, I guess it just wasn't sparking. Well, out of basically just frustration at this point, I took out one spark plug and grabbed a used LS spark plug out of one of my other engines, realized that it would fit, shoved it in, and wouldn't you know it, the engine would pop every single time on that stroke. So it would pop, 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 pop as we were cranking. Well, if that was working, take out another spark plug, put in 2 spark plugs now, and then it would go pop, 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 pop as we were cranking. Add 2 more spark plugs and the thing pretty much fired up immediately and was running on 4 cylinders. So at that point we concluded it had to be the spark plugs, took all 8 out, put 8 ones in, and basically that's where we are now. So I'm gonna go over to the truck, show you guys that it does in fact start. All of this was not not in vain basically. I guess I do kind of know what I'm doing, it's just I make dumb mistakes basically. So let's go ahead and walk over to it and get this thing started. All right guys, get inside the truck here, turn the key, and just what I always wanted was just a simple flick of the switch and the truck should just immediately bark off. So as you can see and hear, it's running well. However, there is quite the loud knocking noise coming from it. Now, that knocking does sound like a lifter. I really do hope that it is a lifter and not, you know, a piston or a rod, but basically that's the status right now. I gotta check oil pressure. I don't have my oil pressure gauge hooked up right now. I'm pretty positive that it does have oil pressure because it did have oil pressure before we started this. Now, obviously that knocking noise is a little bit of concern for me, only because we cranked on this thing so much. I actually did drain the oil. I just got done doing that, filled it back up. Still making the noise, unfortunately. But as you can see here, that's quite a bit of oil for this engine. So I'm assuming a lot of that was washed down with gasoline. So I added 6 quarts back into it. I have to get an oil pressure gauge on it, just make sure that we have pressure, most importantly. And if it continues making that noise, you know, after I warm it up a little bit, hopefully it's a lifter and not something more serious like a rod or crank bearing, because this engine was perfectly fine right when we put it in here. Now we did have a no oil pressure situation not too long ago, but that could also just have messed up the lifters as well. Basically those lifters ran dry for a good little bit there. When we first got this engine in, it did not have any oil pressure whatsoever to the top end of the engine. The bottom end of the engine has always been well lubricated. I just really hope that this is like a lifter issue and not a crank or rod issue. I guess at this point it would not be the end of the world to have to pull this engine and replace a rod bearing, but this would be the 3rd time now that we take this engine out. So I'm really hoping that we, you know, don't have anything too major here, but I'm just happy that the truck starts. It starts up immediately, as you saw. I probably shouldn't be doing this because of that ticking sound, but at this point, I'm gonna give you guys one nice solid rev. This thing sounds incredible. It's basically what I always wanted for the 454. This is what the 454 should be. Just, you know, that raw American power, and now with the fuel injection, it is just so much better. So I'm gonna give you guys a quick little rev, and then pretty much that should wrap up this video. It's been quite the journey, and yeah, so let's do it. All right, let's breathe on this key real quick. All right, one rev, I promise. That noise sounds pretty bad. And the truck does sound pretty good. So, yeah guys, that should conclude this. What did we learn today? Always check the basics. Sometimes when you're doing more advanced stuff like this, you forget about the basics. You lean towards the hardest problems instead of the easiest problems. I would have saved myself about 2 weeks of work if I would have just checked those spark plugs, but because they were new, I took them out of my mind basically. That's it for me, everyone. If you guys enjoy this video, if you guys enjoy the channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Leave me a like on this video, it helps me out a ton. And as always, I will catch you guys in the next one. See you later.